King Radio Network at ParanormalKing.com.
Welcome to the Paranormal News Insider for the week of April 5th, 2022, and this is officially episode number 510, and this is your host, Dr. Brian D. Parsons, and we are live on the Paranormal King Radio Network at ParanormalKing.com. And yes, April 5th, I did take last week off. I think I did like 8 and 10 episodes in a row, and kind of battled through a little bit of a flu kind of thing, and my voice wasn't quite there, so kind of needed a little week for recuperation. And now it's completely different. If I look back 2 weeks ago, I had 3-4 inches of snow on the ground, and today it was in the 60s here Fahrenheit, and really just a beautiful day. It was outside and getting get my patio set up for the summertime already. It's just weird how the weather can change in just a matter of a couple of weeks. Granted, it's Ohio. We're probably going to get probably one more snow blast, I'm sure, before it's all said and done. And baseball's around the corner for those of you who partake in that. I'm sure some people are still in basketball mode, which is near the end, as is hockey and everything else. Winter related. And of course, here in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio area, we're always talking football. And of course, that's a disaster that's for a whole different show. But we're also in a weird time of the year. One of my favorites as far as the paranormal goes. And it's never anything I enjoyed as a kid, but I enjoy the twist of, do I say irony? I guess the irony of April 1st. And of course, yes, April 1st is April Fool's Day. And it's a time for hijinks. It's a time for hoaxes. It's a time for pranks. And you'll see a lot of that affecting the paranormal. Bigfoot's always a big target. Every year there's some sort of Bigfoot story. Kind of I don't want to say a letdown this year, but not a whole lot about Bigfoot, except for one story that we'll talk about tonight that was near and dear to me personally, on a personal level. But just, I don't know, I think we've taken a little bit of time off from April Fool's Day. 2020, there was really not much, a little bit of a warm-up. Last year, people were testing the water, with the seriousness of COVID-19, and just kind of testing the waters last year. It wasn't a whole lot of stuff. But this year it seemed like it was almost back to normal. But we have a few stories that were affected by April Fool's Day. And we're going to we're going to jump right in. No other fluff tonight. We're going to jump right in with both feet. And we're going to go to our favorite creature, not really our favorite creature, but one of my kind of favorite paranormal topics here in the cryptid arena, and that, of course, your favorite, the Loch Ness Monster. So why do I like the Loch Ness Monster? Granted, it's one of the probably top 2 most talked about. Granted, Bigfoot is worldwide, universal, but unless you're in the United Kingdom, Loch Ness Monster is king or queen. But despite all the scientific evidence pointing away from that being a possibility, people still talk about it. They still believe in it. It still sells newspapers. It still sells advertisements. And as long as that happens, as long as people want to read about it, they're going to continue to put it in newspapers, or at least online newspapers. Nobody reads newspapers anymore, I don't think. And with that, culturally, it'll continue forever. And We've talked about the Otago DNA analysis of Loch Ness, where they went throughout the loch at various depths around the loch, pulling out water samples and analyzing DNA, and did not find anything that would suggest a large creature is swimming in the loch. But the story, unfortunately, focused on an eel. So people think there's a giant eel that is about, does explain that, but that's really not logical. But again, didn't prove anything was there. And we've had all sorts of different scientific analysis on that. And regardless, people want to believe. They want something like this to exist. And the scientific dismissal of this creature is never enough to get rid of this. So, but sometimes we go months without seeing the Loch Ness Monster, and people get a little worried. A few years ago, we had a story on here that a lot of experts thought that the Loch Ness Monster had died or moved away. But that wasn't the case, because a few months later, boom, there they were. Sighting after sighting after sighting. And we're in a little bit of a rut right now with Loch Ness Monster sightings. There's hasn't been one in about 5 months, maybe a little longer than 5 months. But now, not only has one been recorded as a sighting, but there's controversy surrounding it, which we really haven't had that in a while. People arguing over a Loch Ness Monster sighting, whether it's legit or not. And of course, I took a little time off last week, and that's when all this unfolded. So back on March 23rd, the first official Loch Ness Monster sighting of 2022 occurred. Sort of, if you want to call it that. Longtime Loch Ness Monster researcher Ian O'Fadigan, who I think he would call himself a Loch Ness Monster expert. There's quite a few. We'll hear from another one here in a second. Ian O'Fadigan, and he is probably, when you look at the Loch Ness Monster Sightings Register, which is the official listing of the official, you don't see my finger quotes because I don't have video, but I got the finger quotes going in the air, official Loch Ness Monster sightings. And Gary Campbell, he's the judge, jury, and I guess executioner on whether or not these are legitimate sightings. And apparently he does discount some that do have logical explanations. He will not include them into the register. So he doesn't take every single claim, which is good. Makes me sleep better at night knowing that. But Ian O'Fadigan sees the Loch Ness Monster more than anybody, it seems. And he claims to have captured webcam footage of two dark shapes on the loch. This changes everything. Did the Loch Ness Monster have a baby? What's going on? Why is there two dark shapes? Maybe it's humps in the water. Maybe we're going back to that shape of a creature. I think we are, ever since that eel story. Ian probably holds the record for the most sightings of Nessie in the official Loch Ness Monster sightings register. His sighting occurred on, again, March 23rd at 3:26 p.m. And this was on the Loch Ness Monster webcam, which, I've talked about quite a bit here. And it's probably the worst quality camera I have ever seen on a webcam. And it's really hard to get a good webcam that you're going to have outside, especially in the Scottish hillsides. And it's put in view for the largest view, or I should say the widest view of that part of Loch Ness, which, it's pretty long. It's a narrow stretch of water. It's almost like a big river versus a lake in its appearance. So they're trying to get a wide swath of this water, but doing so, it's way up on a hill, and it looks like it's 10 miles away from the water. It looks like it's, they joke about a potato being a camera. It looks like it's inside of a potato. smeared with a whole entire bottle of Vaseline. It's really hard to see anything. I watch it, but I squint. Walk across the room and see. You can't look close at the camera. You have to, my monitor's on the other side of the room, and I still can't see any. I just don't see what people see here. It's very ambiguous, basically. But Ian, somehow, some way, is able to analyze what he sees on the webcam. He did see wake-like movement of two objects that were moving parallel to each other at a distance of about 150 yards. I don't know how he figures that out, but, well, he's the expert. He said the shapes were visible for 1 minute and 44 seconds before they disappeared, followed by one of the shapes reappearing for another minute and a half. And that went into the register as the first sighting. Everyone's excited. Case closed. But not exactly. On March 31st, it was reported that offshore catering manager Richie Cameron and his friend Stephen Noble, who are both 45 years old. Stephen Noble is an industrial cleaner. This is weird. Well, speaking of a cleaner, they both came clean about more than likely being responsible for Ian O'Fadigan's webcam sighting. Well, how is that possible? Well, the pair operate the Extreme Paddleboarding Scotland social media website. I mean, how extreme is paddleboarding? You stand on top of a board. What else you can do? It's not like you can go 100 miles an hour. It's not like you're going to fly. You're standing on a board with a paddle. I don't know. Extreme Paddleboarding Scotland. I guess it doesn't take much in Scotland. So they were in the area paddleboarding extremely at the time and date in question, and they've got photos to prove it. But all you got to do is go to their website. They're on Facebook. You can see them. The website has plenty of photos of the dynamic duo near Urquhart Castle on the day, and again, near the time of the sighting. And they even describe how they were parallel to each other, just as described. So, taken out of the history books. It's pretty rare that we get a Loch Ness Monster sighting put into the register and then yanked out. A lot of times you don't even hear about these stories where people will make a claim and the story never makes it in there. But this one was put in there and then pulled out. And of course, the newspaper always wants to, they want, to hear everybody's side of it. So, of course, already hearing about Ian O'Fadigan's citing his description of what he saw, I mean, to me, it's more than logical. It probably, that's exactly probably what he saw on that webcam. It's not like you could zoom in. You can't, there's no way to really see anything other than pretty much blurriness on the webcam. But they reached out to the Inverness Courier, reached out to O'Fadigan, who was pretty much, he told him no, that's not what he saw. He was very adamant that his footage was not paddleboarders. Well, I don't know how you prove it. I mean, the burden of proof is on him. But if these two were in the area at the time, the exact same kind of formation, and at the time, they got photos to prove it with timestamps. Sorry, Ian. I don't know what you want us to say, but you're not in the books for this one. I mean, you got plenty of sightings. I think he had like 5 last year. But in 2021, Gary Campbell, who again is the owner of the Loch Ness Monster Sightings Register, he actually separated the Loch Ness Monster sightings between the webcam the actual in-person views, which is great because, again, the webcam is horrible. It's horrible. And if you, there's another story that came out. So Steve Feltham, who is another so-called expert on the Loch Ness Monster, he pretty much said the images from the live webcam can't be considered evidence at all because that quality is absolutely horrible. He says it's so poor that at best it could be used to determine whether it's night or day. And that's about it. I totally agree with him. It's horrible. There's really no focus on anything. And I've watched it where the sunlight hits spider webs or raindrops on spider webs and creates all kinds of weird images. And you just really can't tell what you're looking at. There's no way to see if it's a duck or it's a deer swimming across the loch, which actually happens on occasion. You can't tell what you're looking at. Even boats are kind of hard to see what you're looking at. So I just don't think the webcam is worth anything. But I do appreciate the fact that he did separate those two. And we've had some interesting webcam sightings, and some of these have happened from other countries, as we talked about last year, which is interesting. I wish I had the kind of time just to sit around and stare at the webcam for the Loch Ness Monster, but a little more pressing things to do. But now, what do we do now? Now there's, again, no Loch Ness Monster sighting. Whoa, wait a minute. Cancel that. A week after the paddleboarders were out there, were on the loch, somebody did actually see the Loch Ness Monster. Producer and documentary filmmaker Warren Speed, sounds made up, and his colleague Jamie Huntley were in the area conducting research when they had their own sighting, a real live sighting, not through a webcam. The event occurred at 11:18 a.m., as Speed described, saying, quote, "We were just pulling up to the Balskin burial grounds, and I saw something like a very large upturned boat out of the corner of my eye. Then Jamie shouted, 'Stop!' He saw it fully and said it was a hump like a very dark whale, a 5-meter long and 2-meter high. By the time I stopped the car a few meters later, trees were covering our view. I quickly reversed. Jamie jumped out, but all he got on his phone camera were very large circular ripples. If I had arrived literally 10 seconds earlier, we would have caught this on camera. We were both absolutely gutted, but in another way, amazed," unquote. So they saw it. They think they saw it. They're not sure they saw it, but they did get, well, a picture of something. And that's going into the record books. To me, I don't know. It's almost the same as a webcam sighting. You don't have anything to really show for it. But anyway, Huntley commented, he said, quote, "I had my phone out and took pictures of the ripple in the water, expanding from the point the object or creature disappeared down. The object or creature was reflecting the water, so it looked wet, almost like a whale skin crossed with a fish skin. It was dark in color, darker than the water surrounding it. There were dark grays, black, browns in color. It almost looked like how a whale hump might look breaking the surface, minus the fin. There was also a definite movement, but did not see too much of the movement before trees obscured it. It was a very big size, at least 15 foot long, maybe bigger, around the middle of the loch. There was a small speedboat that came up the loch after my sighting, but wasn't anywhere near the spot I saw the object or creature. but wouldn't be surprised if they had seen it too in the distance as they started circling around the area. Using their speedboat as a reference, it was much larger than the boat. As an estimate, I'd say the object was around 7 feet high out of the water, unquote. That's exciting for, his description. I don't know how they got all that out of the corners of their eyes, but that's a pretty big creature if that's exactly what they saw. So in the, I thought I had it saved. Where's the picture? Well, they did have, here's the, thought I had the ripple of the water, but I do have a drawing that he did. And, oh no, here it is. So I'll do, in the chat room, I've got a picture of, the top is the ripple that he took a picture of, and on the bottom is a drawing that he drew. It's a pretty good drawing, I suppose, with guesstimate of 7 foot out of the water at 15 foot wide. I mean, that would be huge. That would be bigger than a whale at that distance, if you're estimating that. And I'm not so sure about the color. At that distance, you're probably just seeing a reflection of water. And the way the loch is, that water is, that's the bluest I've ever seen Loch Ness. Usually that water is very, very dark because of the peat moss and the surrounding hills drains into the loch. That water is super dark. It's not filthy water. It's just dark with sediment, with peat moss, not Pete, a guy named Pete. But yeah, peat makes the water dark. And usually it's not that blue, which kind of threw me off when I saw it. But you're going to get weird reflections. And the way it's built, it's not really built, I guess, the way it is, very steep hillsides, again, a very long, thin body of water. The wind can play a lot of tricks. I've seen a lot of videos of people taking videos of the loch, and you can see the wind just randomly making these strange shapes in the water. And you also get water moving back and forth. A seiche, kind of like your bathtub. Those of you that take baths and push the water around, hits one side, comes back, and goes back and forth, will create ripples in the water as well. I'm not sure what that is. Could have been anything. Could be a school of fish under the water as well. But for them to describe something coming out of the water, well, that's something totally different. But again, that burden of proof is on them to prove it. Gather evidence to support a giant, super giant creature. I mean, that's pretty big. So I took there's the drawing. It's a little bit bigger. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that's scary. Whatever that could be. Ginormous animal under the water. So what were these two doing? So they were a documentary filmmaker and his research partner. Well, they're in town, of course, researching the Loch Ness Monster, but also UFO sightings in the area, as well as the life and times and, of course, mysteries surrounding the infamous occultist Aleister Crowley, who used to live along the loch. I don't know. Maybe they're just trying to get their name out for it. It's kind of early if you haven't started filming it yet, but I don't know. It's always kind of questionable when you have people who are putting together something they're going to make money from, who make a report like this. But, again, it's the burden of proof is on them to validate their sighting. But, it doesn't hurt to report it. They're excited. They saw something. But, yeah, all you got is a little puddle of water there. So we shall see. But wasn't paddle boarders, that's for sure. And as far as Loch Ness Monster is concerned, we'll see. It's probably getting warmer out there. And I'm sure we're gonna have our stories. We'll have a hoax or three this year coming out of Loch Ness. And speaking of hoaxes, let's go to the Bigfoot world, where that never happens. Plenty of Bigfoot material floating around the last few weeks. I've seen some videos. There was this one. These guys were, I forget what state it was, driving around in this little off-road vehicle, and suddenly the camera pans after a few minutes of driving, and you're looking through a bug-covered windshield, and the camera turns toward the driver, but then aims directly out of the window, just in time to capture, looks like a guy running in a Bigfoot suit. You can kind of see white socks on his feet coming through the costume, and yeah, just horrible. But they swear up and down, no, that's we didn't fake it. Sure. A lot of other Bigfoot stuff out there. And this one, the story that I'm going to talk about, is on the History Channel. It's on a TV show we've talked about on this show before, called The Proof Is Out There. And this episode, I don't know if the show is done for the year or what, but the last episode was back on March 4th of this year. It was titled Ancient Alien Carvings and Bigfoot Shrooms, was the name of the episode back on March 4th. They haven't had one since, so don't know if they're wrapped up for the year. I would think it was like the 26th episode or something like that. So it's been a long season. Their first season was only 10 episodes. So we'll see if that's going to continue on or not. So I don't really watch. I don't wait for it. It doesn't pop on the History app. You have History Plus? Probably not. No, they probably do. They all do have their plus. Should be a $sign instead of a plus sign. I don't know. That's just me. But The Proof Is Out There. Not something I watch constantly, but I do catch clips like this one on YouTube every now and again, or a story when something controversial comes out. Of course, we talked about back in, what was that about? The Patterson-Gimlin film. It was earlier in this second season, I believe, that they talked about. Very good episode. Watch that entire one. I think I've only watched one other one. But anyway, there was a video uploaded to YouTube, courtesy of the History Channel, of this episode, of this particular segment. I don't know what they cut out. If there's only 2 stories, I think there was 3 stories, but they only had Ancient Alien Carvings and Bigfoot Shrooms as the title. But I think there was 3, if I'm not mistaken. But only a 5-minute clip of the Bigfoot Shroom segment. It was uploaded to YouTube on April 2nd. And this is a mushroom hunter in northern Illinois. Is on the prowl for some mushrooms. And he's kind of doing a little dialogue as his camera's panning around the forest floor. He sees different kinds of mushrooms attached to trees. And then he shows one that appears that has a bite taken out of it. And suddenly, as host Tony Harris describes, a loud and drawn-out screaming howl comes from the woods around the man. And it's really a very comical sound. It doesn't actually sound real at all for anyone who listens to any of these videos or has ever actually been out in the woods before. It doesn't sound real to me. And I actually laughed out loud, which that phrase is used quite a bit. I laughed out loud. LOL. But I did. I laughed when I heard this. I had to stop the video and go back. Just as the scream was made, The guy's filming and he pans up and he basically goes, huh? Like, that's not a normal reaction. Huh? To a loud scream like that would fill the forest. I would probably have a few expletives, even though, I'm not afraid to be out in the woods by myself. I do it quite frequently. It doesn't bother me at all. But anything that would startle you, I don't think you're just going to say, huh? Especially when you're in the woods talking to yourself. Very less than convincing. Even less convincing, again, was that sound that he purportedly recorded during his mushroom hunting jaunt. The sound, while extremely loud, it sounded very close, but didn't fit in the landscape. I don't know how to explain it. It just sounded hollow, I guess, is how it was described in this episode. Just it didn't fit the landscape, if that makes sense. There was no echo. It sounded flat, and it had kind of a mechanical sound to it. The video itself was made in May of 2015, and watching this 5-minute clip on the History Channel, Tony Harris is great to watch. He's just so into it. Well, the proof is out there. But they brought in all these experts. It's the only part of the show I can't stand, where they're dismissing different things that are pretty obvious. But I guess the average viewer may not, have as much experience in this stuff as some of us watching. But they bring in all these experts. They say, well, it can't be a bear because bears don't have a long, drawn-out cry. It's really just a quick grunt. Couldn't have been a coyote, couldn't have been a wolf, couldn't have been a fox, might have been a dog. Because, yeah, dogs sound just like that. But again, yeah, probably not. No other animal, and they couldn't figure it out. Doesn't fit any sort of pattern of any animal. So they turned the sound over to an expert sound ecologist, whatever that is, a sound ecologist named Ben Gottesman. And Gottesman evaluated the sound, saying it sounds, again, hollow and muffled and doesn't fit the open forest, which I totally agreed with. And again, I think they chopped this up for YouTube. I don't think this is the entire segment of the episode just being 5 minutes long. And he quickly says he went digging for sound effects and found a perfect match from a show about dinosaurs. So then he plays the clip, and lo and behold, it's the same sound. So this guy hoaxed. But I don't remember that coming out. I don't remember hearing that one back in 2015, but apparently it was big enough to make the show. So wonderful. And hoax galore for Bigfoot. No, that wasn't on April Fool's Day. That was way back on March 4th. But it was uploaded a day after April Fool's Day for the episode. And again, we started talking about April Fool's Day, and of course, April 1st on Friday, which it's kind of rough when it's in the middle of the week, or I should say at the book end of the week. I remember a few years ago, it was in the middle, I think it was on a Wednesday, and all heck broke loose with different stories, and people were confused the entire week. Again, fun-filled pranks, stories that are obviously not real, but sometimes there's stories that people are not sure. Those are the ones I can't stand. I'm fine with the story being so outlandish that it's not true. I'll get a kick out of that. I think it's funny. There's always a ton of products that are introduced that are just absolutely silly, and announcements that are just too outrageous to be true. LeBron James said he was quitting for the year, and saw some other baseball players say that they were going back to their old teams. Brandon Phillips, he used to play for the Cleveland Indians. went to the Reds. Said he was coming back to the Reds, but he's not. He's too old. But sometimes these stories are sometimes just a little questionable. You're not sure. Are they trying to hoax? Or are they not trying to hoax? Could this be real? Sometimes they're truly meant to fool people, though, which, it's a little crazy. And sometimes it's irresponsible, I think, with some of these companies. Was it Taco Bell? I forget what year it was. Taco Bell announced they bought the Liberty Bell. And I believe that one was on the middle of the week, and people lost their minds. They thought that was a real story. People were calling different organizations. They were calling newspapers, and everybody's got an opinion. And theirs was right, and they said that this is un-American. They shouldn't be able to do this. And of course, it was all just an April Fool's Day joke. It took a lot of people too seriously. But luckily, most of the fooling with April Fool's Day happens around fake products. This year, some of the coolest ones that I saw were Omaha Steaks. You see this one, Omaha Steaks? They tweeted out. I was on Twitter all day just because I knew. It's 2 times of the year. Maybe not 2 times of the year. At least 2 times of the year, I'm on Twitter refreshing every 5 seconds. It's April Fool's Day, and it's the trade deadline for baseball, July 31st. That's usually the 2 days I'm on Twitter. My thumb aches. But Omaha Steaks, they had the Meat Sweats. Yes, the Meat Sweats well-marbled roll-on perspirant with powerful 24-hour protection, available in 3 scents: original beef, lighter fluid, and mesquite. I don't know, that mesquite would be pretty cool, I think. Not the lighter fluid. Definitely not the lighter fluid. Yingling Brewery, which is Pennsylvania beer, they introduced Lager, a line of beer-scented shampoo, conditioner, and body wash. I'm not sure that's a good idea. You're going to be doing the ABCs quite a bit if you get caught weaving in your lane. What was it? There was Lipsicles, the popsicle, the company that makes the popsicles. There were flavored popsicles with Vaseline, designed to make your lips better. Some people would probably believe that. Krispy Kreme introduced a fresh vanilla cream scented perfume in a ring-shaped bottle, which, again, I think people would want that. Of course, fake stories are also a thing. It's not just the products. And again, I talked about baseball. They had an announcement, too, on April 1st. Their statement, they said that umpires would announce plays that were under review. And a lot of people were doubting that. They thought it was April Fool's Day joke made by baseball. But unfortunately, it's true. It's going to be awkward, although other sports do it already. So they should get with the times. I saw a few tweets, even one from Twitter itself, that said it was working on an edit button, which would be great. Then Elon Musk responded. So he's a major stakeholder in Twitter. He said, you want it? I can do it. I can make it happen. The National Park Service proposed to rotate the Lincoln Memorial 180 degrees. That was one of my favorites. I got a chuckle. As part of a preservation project. So now we get to see the back of Abraham Lincoln for a time. It's not true, though. It's not true. They're not doing it. There are generally a lot of local stories as well, so it's not always a nationwide thing. And with Washington, D.C., they also announced that Dulles Airport, they announced nonstop flights to the moon later this month. Obviously not true, but a cute little gimmick, and locally, of course. And here in Ohio, I was very excited to see a Bigfoot story, which was spoiled, obviously, for being April Fool's Day, and it was an obvious April Fool's joke. But I was excited to see it was a local outdoor music venue called Blossom Music Center. And you might remember, if you're a fan of the show, we did a story about Ricky Rocket, who is a YouTube channel, and he talked about Bigfoot. He did a really, really good job. I was, a big fan of his and the band that he's a part of called Poison, which is an 80s hair band. You might have heard of Bret Michaels, who's the lead singer of that. He's been obviously the front man. He's pretty famous himself. Been on a lot of TV shows. One of my earliest favorite hair bands of that mid-late 80s genre of music, and Ricky Rocket being the drummer. But he did it was a really good video on Bigfoot. I watched a couple of his other videos on different topics. He does an excellent job with that. And Poison was one of the first concerts that I remember going to at Blossom. And that would have been way back, way, way, way back. Probably 1986 or 87. I don't have the T-shirt anymore to prove it. I might have that ticket stub somewhere. Anyway, enough reminiscing. Blossom Music Center released a YouTube video with a Bigfoot lurking around the outdoor facility. So Blossom is mostly, I'm going to say mostly, it's probably almost half and half. There's a large grassy hill that you can sit on and you can watch, or you can sit in the pavilion, which is covered, but you're still outdoors. And I've seen a lot of bands there, a lot of music over the years. Gosh, now I'm thinking about it, all sorts of genres of music that I've seen there, from Steve Miller Band to Dave Matthews Band to a few hard rock bands over the years. But it was obvious. It wasn't. They didn't try to fool you. It was obviously somebody in a costume, but it was very entertaining the way they filmed it. And they had you would see the Bigfoot, but then they would stop the video, and a little red circle would go around it in case you didn't see it. They also had a red arrow in one scene in case you couldn't tell where the Bigfoot was. Pretty obvious, but it was pretty cute. Where the creature was, or I should say the guy in the suit was. And it was all in fun and a very smart way for them to advertise the Cleveland Orchestra, which had their tickets go on sale yesterday, April 4th, for the summertime, which is another great thing about that, was talking about the summer. And again, that's a local story for me. Really the only big Bigfoot hoax or prank dealing with April Fool's Day. Usually there's a bunch, but I didn't see too much out there of the big guy. The Blossom Music Center is in Cuyahoga Falls, which is just north of Akron, and I'm just north of that. It's actually 14 miles away from where the Kenmore Grassman was sighted back in 1995. And Kenmore is about 40 miles, you go 40 miles southeast of those areas is where Minerva is. Minerva is home to the Minerva Monster, which is also a Bigfoot-like creature seen back in 1978. And Blossom is a 16-mile drive from where I'm sitting right now. And it's, I think, 5 miles away from where I bought my motorcycle as well. So very close. So pretty cool. Nice, clean story that's obvious fake. They didn't try to fool you. Very good. April Fool's Day is also a big time for UFO hoaxes. And sometimes people just want to fool UFO researchers. But mostly it's just to generate a little bit of panic, I think, with people who believe in it or get a story out there. I mean, there's always a UFO story. Generally, hoaxes are always in the news feed somewhere. Somebody believing in something that's obviously not true or just a made up story. But April Fools is when the general public, everybody, wants to fool somebody with that topic in hand. But again, I didn't see really a whole lot, but it could have gotten really bad. And actually may still get bad. I haven't heard anything yet. Kind of keeping an eye on things, and I'll tell you why. British UFO researcher and author Nigel Watson might have successfully thwarted an attempt by an online group to organize a fake UFO invasion spread over multiple cities worldwide at the same exact time. The plan was hatched on an online forum that during that discussion, it was private, so people couldn't join it. Although Watson had joined the forum when it was publicly accessible, he states the plan was for remote-controlled hobbyists to put LED lights on their drones and fly them over major cities all over the world at the same time in order to induce a bit of panic. And hopefully they coordinate that by, different time zones. And of course, if, all those were seen and social media picked it up, I'm sure somebody somewhere would put all that together and people would just absolutely lose their minds. In all, 30 different drone hobby groups became involved from the United States, the UK, France, South Africa, and the Netherlands. The original plan was to launch this worldwide attack on April 1st, but then organizers kind of wanted to take this to the next level, and that's usually when things fall apart. Always stick with your original plan when trying to perpetrate a hoax. Organizers changed the date to April 5th to keep it from being an obvious hoax, since people are most skeptical on April Fool's Day, which is it's always my speech I give every year is if we were half as critical of these stories every day of the year, we wouldn't. I probably would be out of a job here. I wouldn't have the show, but we need to be more critical, especially of these paranormal stories. And obviously, regular everyday news is news, but it's always twisted to fit a means or a belief or something. But yeah, these paranormal stories, we should be more skeptical. But again, they sell advertising slots, and that's really the bottom line. Nobody really cares if they're real or not, especially in the media. They don't care if it's real or not. So they just will pump stuff out. They don't care. They don't do the legwork to validate or invalidate or find out if it's true. They just print what happened, which is irresponsible. I don't think that's real journalism. Journalism to me is doing research behind the story for validation, so that what is happening is truly what is happening. And if we were critical, not dismissive or doubtful, but at least critical of the news, we could get rid of a good chunk of this paranormal stuff that comes out. And I wouldn't have to explain all this to you, that this is not real and that's not real. We can concentrate on what is pertinent for the news. But April Fool's Day, always fun because of all the silly stuff. And you don't have to worry about whether or not it's real or not, because usually it's pretty obvious that it's fake. But and the sneaky thing is, if somebody does something in Europe, they can do it earlier for us could be before midnight. So we might be confused because over there hits April Fool's Day before over here, the United States. And they always try to pull pranks early. Sometimes we had quite a few the afternoon yesterday. I don't mean yesterday. Friday, April 1st. It was all during the day, all day long. April Fool's Day pretty much winds down in the afternoon, evening, but doesn't matter. There were people putting out tweets at 8, 9 o'clock at night on April 1st. So I don't know. There's no time frame for that. Just as long as you do something stupid on April 1st. I didn't get around to it. I was going to say I was going to run for Ohio governor, but I forgot to tweet that out. But anyway, back to this drone situation. May still happen. Who knows? Maybe it's going on right now, or maybe it'll happen at 9 o'clock tonight. I don't know what time. There was not a whole lot of detail. I don't know. Maybe that was done by design so people didn't join in. I don't know. But Watson publicly wrote about the planned hoax in order to help thwart the plans. And he was even briefly accused of being behind it before he could explain, no, that wasn't me. He said, quote, "I don't agree with hoaxing. Nonetheless, some people have secretly conducted hoaxes to scientifically test the reactions of UFO investigators and the public," unquote. Well, I'm not sure about scientific, but there have been plenty of hoaxes about UFO sightings meant to fool UFO researchers. The same in pretty much every field. I remember the drone capturing Bigfoot in the woods, and everybody bought it. Everybody thought it was real. Not everybody, but a good chunk of people thought it was real. And a few days later, they had a follow-up video where the Bigfoot turned around and had a sign that says, "Really? You believe that?" And a lot of people felt silly. But when it comes to the general public, a lot of people don't know. They don't know what to believe. And when they do see lights in the sky, they automatically believe that they're being invaded. So you don't know. You don't know what the general public will do or how people will react. You don't want people shooting at drones in major metropolitan cities, things like that. It's very irresponsible, but I get it. You just want to make a name for yourself. Hopefully, all that falls apart and we don't have to hear about anything of those sightings. And maybe, if it does happen, even if it doesn't make the news, maybe those sightings will get reported to somebody, maybe MUFON or New Fork or somebody. Speaking of MUFON recently released the March 2022 sightings. They have their March 2022 sightings statistical report. It's a mouthful. Where they have their numbers of sightings and their total number of sightings. So before I say that, it was last month was very, very disappointing. 399. That's pretty much the lowest I've seen it, even for a short month like February. It's generally pretty low because it's heavy cloud cover, cold, snowy throughout most of the northern hemisphere, and it's also a short month. But 399 for last month, or for I should say February, not last month, coming off of a 559 total for January, which is pretty strong. It's pretty good. It's actually probably your average, to be honest. So for the month of March, I was curious, would this continue? Would it continue to drop? Would it continue to be lower? Would it shoot back up to January numbers? Well, no, not really. It total was 417. So a slight increase, but still pretty low 417. So I don't have numbers for last year. They didn't really put things out last year. But to go back a couple of years to 2020, and it's 883. The year before that, 2019, 580. We go to 2018, 640. March of 2017 was 478. So, yeah, it's a little low. So it makes you wonder, is it UFO sightings in general, or is it the fact that maybe people aren't reporting it to MUFON, maybe somebody else, or they're just not reporting it? What's happening? Are we losing trust in MUFON? I don't know. I don't have that answer. But total of 417, of course, being a United States-based investigation unit, the United States has the most sightings at 338. France was second with 24. United Kingdom had 19. Canada turned in 9. Mexico and Australia had 3 sightings apiece. Morocco, Brazil, Germany had 2. And there's a bunch here. Croatia, Kenya, Georgia, Belgium, Dominican Republic, Norway, Costa Rica, Slovakia, Ireland, South Africa, and a handful of other countries with just 1 report. So of that 338 reports here in the United States, 41 happened in California. Of course, I say it every time, every month. California should be number 1 because it's number 1 in population. So statistically speaking, that should be the number 1 state with reports. If reports are even, of course, if there is a massive event happening or people are reporting heavily from other states, but I think I've only seen Florida once in first place, but California generally is always number 1 in these statistics. Doesn't mean there's more sightings. It's just, again, larger amount of public people peering at the skies. And sometimes, if they see a rocket, you'll get a bunch of people reporting that. Florida, number 2 with 25. Texas, 3rd with 24. Pennsylvania and New York both had 17 sightings apiece. Arizona and Georgia had 16. Colorado had 13. Michigan, 12. Missouri, 9. Nevada and North Carolina had 8. Indiana, Ohio, both had 7 apiece. And it kind of trickles down. Idaho, Oregon, Washington. Is that how you say that? Washington? There's an R there. Arkansas, they had, Arkansas had 5. So Washington, Oregon, Idaho had 6. Arkansas, Illinois, South Carolina, and Alabama, as well as Kentucky, had 5. Oklahoma, New Hampshire, Virginia, Connecticut, Wisconsin, and Tennessee had 4. Then it just goes downhill from there. Hawaii had 3. That's pretty good for Hawaii because it's very low in population. And I don't see Alaska on the list. Anytime Alaska has more than 1, Alaska had 2. So Alaska, that's pretty good. That per capita being the lowest state puts that way up there. I don't really do the per capita anymore, but that's a good way to see which state actually probably had the heavier numbers of sightings. Of course, it's all very, very, very unscientific because these reports represent UFO sightings that were reported during the month of March. So somebody might have seen something back in July of 1995 and just happened to finally get around to making that report now. Or maybe they saw it earlier in the year and just finally realized, hey, there's this organization called MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, where I can put a sighting in on the website. So maybe they didn't know that. So sometimes these are delayed, sometimes these are historical, and sometimes they actually did happen in that month. So, of course, if somebody saw something on February 28th and they didn't get it reported that same night, it's going to go into the next month. So it's very unscientific, very difficult to disseminate that. We're supposed to really work on that and get all that fixed. But, we shall see. And, we'll see what happens. But I'll keep an eye on those sighting statistics to see whether or not we get a little bit of a bump. And if we get more sightings. But I think New Fork, which has been in the news a lot more, the National UFO Reporting Center, they get their organization in the news quite a bit better than MUFON. They're probably getting more of the share of sightings anymore. So I think it's kind of swayed away from them. Their time is ticking, I think. But still a large organization. And we'll see what happens in the future. That being said, it's time for me to sign off. I'm going to head over to listen to the Mallard Report with Jim Mallard. And I'll be hanging out over there on his channel, his network, Mallard Report, Mallir. I'm sorry, Liard, if I remember correctly. Yes, Mallard. So I'll be over there. And I want to thank you guys for being over here tonight. If you're listening live, if you're listening to the podcast, I still appreciate you just as much. It's not any better or any worse not to be in the chat room. I get it. We all got stuff to do. I got a lot of stuff to do. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Tonight, I shall see you next week. Well, at least you'll hear me next week. I don't think I'll see you, but maybe I will. Depends on who you are, I suppose. But for now, keep your eyes in the skies, your ears in the woods, the hair standing on the back of your neck, and always keep your mind slightly ajar. And above all else, don't stop believing. For the Paranormal News Insider, this is Dr. Brian D. Parsons reporting.